Hey there guys, welcome back for another episode of Mortal Realms Monday painting videos. This week we are taking a look at the Azyrite bell tower from issue 36 of the Mortal Realms magazine. So first of all, this is a very short quick painting video aimed towards those of you a little more new to the hobby, although some of you experienced painters may enjoy watching this. So all I'm going to do with this video is keep the techniques nice and simple, and we'll end up with a nice, simple, easy to do, clean bell tower using a small number of paints. I think I used 12 paints in this in total, and even a couple of those you could probably substitute out if you wish. So first of all, I've gone and assembled part of the bell tower. If you are following the Mortal Realms magazine, they do recommend doing this in sub-assemblies, meaning that you only assemble parts of the tower, paint them up, and then assemble it all fully at the end. So for the most part of this video, we'll break it down into a couple of sections where we'll be focusing on this area you can see on screen here, the bell tower itself, the stonework and the bell, and then the second part will focus on the woodwork. So that's the stairs and the two platforms, the ladders and things like that, and then we'll finish it off with the skeletons and something slightly different that I've done, which you guys can see towards the end, using the skulls that we got from one of the previous issues. So first of all, as I said, I've pre-assembled part of this and undercoated it with a grey primer. You could use white if you wanted to, but obviously grey saves time on then having to go and paint it grey. So on top of this, I'm now applying a coat of Nuln oil and just getting this so that it stains those flat surfaces and really gets into those cracks and creases, pulls up a little bit around, lips and contacting corners and things like that, but I don't want it pooling to the point where we've got puddles forming. So obviously I'll get on with this and catch you guys in just a flash. Right, so now that I've got the Nuln oil nice and dry and a nice even coating over all the stonework, I'm taking a 2-to-1 mix here of Dawnstone to Oathwon Grey. So that's 2 parts Dawnstone and 1 part Oathwon Grey, and a dry brush or a large makeup brush, and I'm removing the excess on paper towel. And I'm just brushing this backwards and forwards, as you can see, at a slight diagonal angle, otherwise sort of straight down the model. And what this is going to do is lay down a fairly heavy layer of paint back over the top of that Nuln oil, so those flat areas will become a little bit more grey and less stained look, and the Nuln oil will remain in those cracks and gaps and lips and edges and things like that, anywhere where this dry brush isn't going to get down into. So it's very lightly brushing across the surface. You don't want to apply too much pressure, otherwise your bristles are going to flick down into those corners and gaps and stuff, and you'll end up applying paint there. And all we're looking to do is get a good dusting of this grey mix over the top. This may take 2 or 3 goes over it, but take your time, make sure that there's not too much paint on your brush. You don't want to put opaque streaks on there. All we're looking to do is get a nice layer back down over the top. So once again, I'll jump on with this and catch you guys in a tick. Okay, so now I'm taking some pure Oathwon Grey, and I'm not cleaning the brush in between painting with this, with the dry brush, I've just made sure that I remove as much of the excess paint as I could, and then I dip into the Ulth1 Grey. And all I'm doing is just testing this on my thumb. It's just that screenshot, just to see how much paint is actually coming off, because all we want this to do is just pick up those edges. This is where the light is going to be catching those sharp edges, corners of the stone, the tops of rounded sections and lips and things like that. After this point, if you wanted to, I will explain extra little details that you could put in, but as I said, I'm keeping this video nice and simple so you guys can follow along, and then it's up to you how much further you want to take it once the foundation is there. So obviously, if you're following along but you want to add extra stuff, then make sure you're happy with your sub-assemblies before fully assembling it, because certain areas are going to be more difficult to get to once it's assembled. So as I said, Ulth1 Grey, lightly dry brushing this, and I'm just aiming to pick off the edges and anything that sort of really sticks out. With the exception to these columns that come down the side, you've got these rounded type pillar posts. I will go sideways on them to put a little bit more highlight on them, but everywhere else it's just to pick off those sharp edges. Okay, so next, moving on to the wooden platforms and stuff, all of the wood areas. I'm using Doombull Brown, as I like the warmer red tone that this has to it, but you can use any kind of browns that you wish. But do remember to paint both sides of the platforms, the ladders and things like that, as you will be able to see some of them at certain angles. So make sure that you do get a couple of even coats on all sides of all the wood sections. Right, and once that is done, we can go ahead and apply a wash to all of the wood sections. And for this, I'm just taking some Agrax Earthshade straight from the pot and applying it liberally over all of the wood sections. Now the planks tend to have some nice deep grooves in there, so make sure that you do allow some of that wash to pool up in those grooves, but you don't want big puddles across the you know, coming out of those grooves and spreading on the model, as it will leave puddle like stains. So just enough to fill up those grooves and details, and then as that dries, that will settle down into them nicely, giving some nice shade and shadow, ready for some dry brush highlight. As with the Doombull Brown, make sure that you do apply this to all sides, all surfaces of the wood, just in case anything becomes visible, you know, when using the terrain, when it's assembled. If you cover your bases and make sure that everything is painted, then you have no problems with grey areas or anything like that. And what I did was paint one side of everything, let it dry, flip it over, paint the other side of everything, and then obviously if it had more sides, repeat that process until all sides were painted. So I'll get on with this and catch you guys in a flash. Okay, so I'm now taking a cheap makeup brush here. I think this is used for eyeshadow, so it has a slightly oval tip, but it is flat, and with the Scrag Brown, removing the excess and again dry brushing all over. Now I'm not looking for full coverage on this. What I'm aiming to do is pick off the edges and the majority of the floorboard texture, but I do want to leave some of that that other texture in there, or that other shade in there, just to give it a little bit of a broken up look. Wood isn't clean all the way across, and with this I'm not using it so much as highlights, as more just where lighter areas of wood are. Where the wood is damp, it's going to be darker; where it's dry, it'll be a bit lighter. so I'm using this to represent those slightly drier spots. So obviously do be careful. I do mess up a little bit here at some point and have a little bit too much paint on my brush, and you'll see that in the form of a little streak that I need to sort of wipe off. So do make sure that you do take the majority of the paint off. You can see here, went straight from the paint. It's not too bad at the minute, but at one point I do end up putting too much pressure and end up with just a little bit too much paint that fills in the gaps. There we go. And that is what you want to avoid. So obviously try to rub it off quickly, but I will have to go back over that a little bit later and darken it down, sort of repaint it a little bit. But anyway, I'll get on with this and catch you guys back once all my wood has had the first scrag brown dry brush coat. Okay, now for the final, we'll call it an edge highlight or a highlight. As I said before, this is more to represent drier sections of wood, but also highlight. So I'm now using XV88. Again, it's more of an ochre colour this, but it does work well with the warmer tones of the scrag brown and the doomball brown, sort of those reddish tones. And once again, just dry brushing it. All I'm doing here is just wiping the excess off on my thumb. I end up with a nice little a couple of little patches on the thumb. No problem with that, it washes off. Just making sure that I take the majority of the excess off, and then just very carefully, very gently, although it's a fast motion, it is very soft along the surface, just picking off again some of those areas. Now I'm not looking for uniform across the piece. Again, if I have a few patches of the scrag brown showing and then a few patches of this, it just adds to that broken up look of the wood. So I'll get on with this and we'll come back for the next section. Okay, so next up I'm taking some Abaddon black and just painting in all of the steel plate and nail heads and things like that, ready for a coat of lead belcher later on. So obviously with the wood frame here, there's some of these the large nail heads, as well as some of these plates with the screws or nails going through them. You've also got the sides of the ladder, obviously for each rung of the ladder, as well as this section. Now you can see here that I finished the bell. Do not worry, you haven't missed anything. That will be coming up. It was just in the order that I'd painted this. I filmed it differently and then I'm editing it so that we can get it in a nice order for you to follow. So I'm going over the silver areas here as I did them without the black and it came out a little bit too faint. So just to show you, get a nice black on those areas and we'll get some silver over the top later on. Okay, so now that all the wood is done, we can move on to the bell. Now in this section obviously you can see that I haven't done the wood there. That's because I did the bell before I filmed the wood section, but if you're following along, follow it in the order that I'm showing you in the video. It will make life easier in terms of painting. So first of all, I'm giving the bell a nice couple of layers of Balthazar gold. This is going to be a brass bell. I believe they're made of brass, copper, bronze. I get them all mixed up. They're all a reddish colour, along with the rings that are throughout the piece. So anywhere that we have these rings, there's 4 of them I believe on the tower itself and 1 or 2 on the wooden frame pieces. So obviously make sure that you do these, and you should already have painted the plates that they are attached to in black, ready for going over with some steel later on. But for now, get these with both Balthazar gold. Get the inside of the bell. It is important to get up in there. You don't have to go right to the deepest part in there, but I would say cover to about halfway up the inside of the bell, just in case anything can be seen at an angle when it's on the table. So a couple of coats of this and we'll be back in a flash. Okay, so now that our Balthazar gold is laid down, we can take some Azyrite Earthshade, and I'm going to apply this quite loosely or liberally over the bell. I do want some pooling, not a huge amount, but we do want a little bit of pooling there. And what this is going to do is give us some shading and shadowing within the bell. Now this will be great if you are looking for a clean bell with no oxidization or anything like that on there. But otherwise, yeah, apply this over the bell. Don't worry too much about the little rings. If you want to do the rings, you can, but in all honesty, there's there's not enough detail on them for any of this to actually catch on and show up. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're looking for a quick paint job. But apply this nicely, get it pooling around that skull and in some of those details in there. You can see that I splash quite a bit in there and then remove a little bit with the paintbrush, just to prevent any deep pools and puddles. And then for the bell itself, make sure that you do cover the entire bell so you don't get streaks and things like that, and that you get a nice even coverage of it, and then leave it for about 20 minutes to dry. Okay, so next up we're going to use some Screaming Bell, because what is a bell without some Screaming Bell? This gives a very nice highlight to the bell. You can see here where that Azyrite Earthshade is settled in nicely into those recesses and stuff, and all this is going to do is pick off those sort of domed surface at the top, some of the raised area of the lettering and things like that, as well as the skull motif on the front. Don't worry too much about covering the sides of the bell between the pillars, as that's going to be a darker area and this is a highlight. So again, dry brushing, remove some of the paint, but we don't need to remove a huge amount here, but you don't want it, swimming on the bristles. Just enough to get it down onto that bell and give it a nice sheen. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in a bit. Okay, so if you want a clean bell, you are done in terms of the bell. Me, however, I like that oxidization green look to it. So I'm taking some Nylock oxide here and I am applying this over the whole bell. Now you'll look at this and think, oh my god, that is way too much. That's just not going to look right. But don't worry, I do have a method to the madness here, and I hope you'll agree that the results afterwards do look pretty good for the finished look. So all I'm doing, applying this all over. You can see I'm getting a nice thick coat on the majority of it. I'm not too worried about a few patches that are thinner. I just want to get it nice and on there. Pooling up is fine, but get it all over, and a little bit on the inside around the dingling bit there, and obviously just around the inside there, just to oxidize that. Now this is where my little technique comes in. I take a piece of folded up paper towel, and I folded this quite a few times to make it quite thick, and I'm just going to rub this off top to bottom, straight down, taking the majority of it off, not pressing too hard, but enough to rub it off, and obviously try and get the side there as well. And you'll see that this is leaving the Nylock oxide in those gaps. So obviously I've opened it up a little bit there just so I can get down the sides, but if you get a nice wad of it, make sure it is folded quite nice. You can get a nice firm pad to it without having to push too hard, and you can pick up the majority of it quite nice. And there you go, leaves it in the recesses, leaves that slightly milky film, which you will naturally get on this kind of metal with oxidization, and then you get the build up of the green where it needs to be. So hopefully the camera's, you know, you're impressed with that on the camera as I was doing this in person, but I'm sure you'll agree it does look pretty cool. And obviously you can do this over the rings if you want to, and anything else that you do in bronze. And once that oxide has dried, I'm just taking some Screaming Bell, and I've pulled my brush through so that it's flat, and I'm just picking off a few random edges. I'm not going all the way across, mainly focusing down if there was a centre line coming down the centre of the bell, about as wide as the motif there. That's where I want my highlight to be, so that's where the majority of the highlights are going. And yeah, do that obviously both sides of the bell, pick off some of the lettering. You're just looking to put a little bit more of a shine on those raised surfaces, and then we can move on to the next step, where I will catch you guys in a bit. Okay, so you'll see here that I have assembled the piece and not attached the ladder, and that is so that I can get to the skulls that I put on the other side. Now you'll notice that those skulls were not part of the model. They are something that I wanted to add. I didn't want the skeletons on both sides of this. I will be having them on the front where my thumb is, which we will be painting separate. But on the other side, I just wanted a stack of skulls, so I super glued the first one down, and then a small drop of glue on his head, tweezers, plop the next one in, and then let them dry. Base coated them with some Corax white, and I'm now going over those and the skeletons in the cages here, and the skeletons that will be in the alcoves with some Morghast bone. So Morghast bone over all the skeletons will be our base colour. Okay, so once that Morghast bone has been laid down and dried, I'm now just going over this whole thing with some Agrax Earthshade. Now normally I would use Reikland Flesh Shade for this, but as I wanted to keep this video a lot more simple and beginner friendly, the Agrax Earthshade is just fine. You know, we've already used it for the wood, so rather than go out and have to buy another shade, you can use the Agrax Earthshade. It is not a problem. It will just be a little bit more towards the brown side rather than the reddish. Otherwise, you know, no difference. Now you'll notice on the cages here, I haven't painted them with the black base coat ready for the silver. This is because the way that I'm going to be doing these skeletons, with dry brushing, it would just end up on the black and you would have to touch that back up. So if you are following along and you haven't done that yet, leave that for now, get these skeletons finished first, and then we can go in and do the black. So yeah, I'll get on with this, let this dry for about 20 minutes, and then we can get on with the next step. Okay, so once that Agrax Earthshade has dried, you'll see here that the bones have a slightly brown tint to them, which is great for, you know, older, dirtier bones. All I'm doing now is going back with some Morghast bone, not too much paint on the bristles here, and just going over some of those raised areas, you know, across the knuckles, the ribs and things like that. Obviously avoiding the recesses and leaving some of that slightly darker bone colour showing in the deeper areas. So I do this on the skulls and all 4 skeletons. If you're not doing the skulls and you are having the skeletons on the reverse side, then obviously you've got 6 skeletons to do. I have glued these guys in now as well, but I did paint them with the Morghast bone before gluing them in, which makes it easier to paint the back side of them. Although you can't see it, it's better to have it completely painted and then glue them in rather than have some grey showing in areas that you can't reach with the brush. So I'll get on with this, catch you guys in a flash. Okay, so with the skeletons done, I'm now taking some Abaddon black and just painting up their cages. Obviously being careful not to get this on the any of the bone, as that is now completely finished. You can see that I'm painting the brackets here, although if you followed my advice earlier on, the majority of the brackets across the wood will already be painted black. If you are following along how I'm doing it here, then obviously you want to go and do all the black across the metal pieces now. So I'll get on with this, and then we'll come back and apply some lead belcher over these areas. Okay, so taking some lead belcher, I'm now going over all of the black areas. So everything on this piece that you have painted black for the metal areas, you can now go and apply this lead belcher. Obviously being very careful again with the skeletons here. Obviously if you do get some on them, then just touch them up a little bit with some of that Morghast bone, and you should be good to go. So obviously this is over all of the cages, the metal plates, the fixing plates with the little bolts and studs and stuff, and any of the nail heads and the plates that the brass rings are on. So like I say, a nice easy paint job. We won't be applying a highlight to this metal. We will use a nice simple technique to allow us some natural highlights while shading at the same time. So I'll get on with this, and then we can come back for that final step. Okay, and finally, using a size 1 brush, or a detail brush if you're using Games Workshop's brushes, anything like that, I'm now taking some non-oil, but I'm not flushing this over the model. What I'm trying to do is pinpoint it down the centre of these metal pieces. And what this is going to do is pull away from the edges and focus in the middle. And what that will do is darken up the centre area and leave us with a natural highlight where the paint has pulled away. Now if you can, try to avoid touching the very edges where those highlights would be, as obviously this will stain it slightly and you'll lose some of that shine. But if you do, you can go round and edge highlight with some lead belcher afterwards. Now like I say, there are going to be you guys out there saying, oh, you need to highlight this, edge highlight that, there's a lot more you could do to this. True, there is a lot more that can be done to this. At this stage we will call it finished, but that is to a quick tabletop finish. This took me about an hour and 40 minutes to get it to this stage, but bear in mind that was with me filming and stopping starting the camera and things like that. Normally this would take me probably about an hour, just over an hour, but there is more that I would do to it to get it to a better finish, such as adding moss, green staining, weathering and things like that. But like I say, this is a nice quick beginner video, or beginner friendly video, to get your models and your terrain onto the tabletop. And then if you want further tips on how to do weathering stuff and extra embellishments, you can check out some of my other videos on painting terrain, such as the Azyrite ruins. That will show you on how I do different wood effects, as well as rust and things like that on the iron and steel sections, such as the cages that we're doing now. Obviously this is going to look a little bit clean. It's easy enough to do, but for the sake of keeping this beginner friendly, this is where we will finish. So I'll get on with finishing this, let it dry, and then show you guys the finished piece. And there we have it, guys, one beginner friendly, tabletop ready Azyrite ruins. As I said, you can take it to this point and then beyond with whatever else you want to do to it. Add moss, add leaves, add dirt, add weather staining, add rust, anything else you want. Nice and easy. There are videos on YouTube. If you would like to see some videos from me, let me know down in the comments below, and I will show you on how to take this further with another video. We can always do that. no problem. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button. It does help the video get noticed and spread through YouTube. The more likes that it receives, the more that it works. Being a low subscriber count at the minute, if we can get 10 likes on this video, I will be super pleased. So hit that thumbs up button. If you enjoyed the video and you like what I'm doing, then please consider hitting that subscription button and ding that bell for notifications on when new videos are uploaded. But until next time guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.